everyone. My name's Natasha from godnoreligion.com, and I'm here with my friend Robert Foust from Texas. And we're here to talk about teenage rebellion from his book, Collision Course with God, which you can purchase on Amazon in print, and also it's on ebook. And I'm going to let Robert just share a little bit about his book and the benefits of it, and a little bit about his testimony, just so that you can get a little bit of an understanding on what we are talking about today. So I'll let Robert, you can explain a little bit about your book.
Yeah, it's called Collision Course with God. And after a year after my son's execution by the state of Texas, God spoke to me, put it on my heart, and said, I need to write a book to help parents, because I went through such extremes with a sociopath or psychopath like my son. I went through so many things and so many extremes, and sometimes on a daily basis, that he knew what I learned from raising him could help anybody with a child, a teenager, particularly adolescents, because they can be a very difficult time for the best of them.
Yeah.
And so he just put it on my heart to write the book and put it out there to help parents. It's just real basic. You know, there's more detailed books if you want to learn about certain items, but it's just a real basic, quick study to help parents.
That's right. So this book is really good for parents who are raising teenagers, because you didn't know that Aaron had a brain condition for much of his younger life. So you were still challenged by a lot of the things that he was doing without having any answers. And so this will help parents see it from your perspective, where you had to really push into God and find some godly solutions, and to hear from him how you were going to work through this. So, and then of course, as he came, was it just about the age of 18 when he got diagnosed? Was it 17 or 18?
Yes. Yeah, he had done a high-speed chase. He was 17 at the time when it occurred, and he did a high-speed chase in Iowa across 2 counties. He did it for fun. He always liked the Dukes of Hazzards, and when they tried to stop him, I don't remember exactly whether he was speeding a little. I think he ran a stop sign, and so the local police tried to stop him, and he said, you know what, I'm just going to have some fun and take off. And he was in a Trans Am, Pontiac Trans Am.
Yeah.
And so he knew he could probably outrun them.
Yeah.
And so from there, it went across 2 counties till he blew one of the front tires and was throwing sparks over the top of the car. And finally he pulled over. He had enough fun and just pulled over and was very casual about the whole experience.
Yeah. And then when he got taken to the police station and he was locked up, right? And then was that when they diagnosed him? When they had
Yes, he was, by the time he had gone to court and they said, okay, you're going to go to jail and have to serve so much time. By the point he was in jail, he was 18, and psychiatrists and psychologists will tell you that they won't diagnose a child before 18. They consider them adult enough, mature at that point. They can diagnose them for such things as being a sociopath.
Yeah.
So that was the first time he'd been diagnosed, and they said, okay, this is why you're the way you are. You're a sociopath.
Yeah.
And so it leads to problems.
Yeah, that's right. And so I've got a little bit here, just a little bit from your book, just to capture some of your emotions that you would have been feeling. This is before the diagnosis, because this is the challenging part. I mean, you get the diagnosis, that's fine, but it's still hard to manage what you're dealing with. But before that, you were completely confused, because you had a wild child doing some strange and weird things and harmful things. And no matter how many psychologists and counselors and people you took him to, you couldn't get any real solutions or answers. So this just becomes very frustrating. Now, this was back in the 70s and 80s, though. So a lot has changed, obviously, for parents with troubled children today. So it's obviously wise to go and seek medical help and counseling, because if your child is acting up, you know, and it's consistent and ongoing behavior, it is very wise to go and get it looked at. Otherwise, it's got the potential to escalate, especially when they come into the troubled teenage years, you know, with their hormones, and they could get into the wrong crowds of meeting different people and the wrong influence. And so it just keeps escalating from that point. But in your book here, I'm just looking at the other screen. It's got, it is really easy as a parent to get caught up in the what if game. You feel guilty and ashamed because of your child's behavior, and you begin to wonder what you have done differently, what you could have done differently. Would it have been different, you know, coming up with different scenarios in your mind? What if this, what if that? You begin to doubt yourself and think, I must have been a really bad parent. So all of these emotions that you would have felt at the time, how did you find your way into settle your mind down? How did you find your best way of coping?
Finally, it just came down to turning everything over to God. You know, I was raised in church and born again Christian from the age of 13, but you know, we still try to stay in charge. That's our human nature, you know, and God give us the right to make our own decisions.
Yeah.
And, you know, I thought, well, you know, I'm a good father. I'm trying everything I know to do. I'm trying to do right. I read him bedtime stories at night. And I thought, you know, surely I can control this. But soon, you know, I was realizing that this is totally out of my control. And finally, after some really dark thoughts, I just turned it over to God and said, God, I just ask that you keep him alive till he comes to Christ. I'd like to spend eternity with him. And I'm turning him over to you and trusting you to take care of him.
Yeah.
And of course, I had no idea at the time that God would go to such extremes to protect him and honor my prayer.
Yeah.
But that's the way God is. If we totally trust him and have faith in him, there's just no limit to what God can do. We are certainly very limited. And as a parent, you think you are, you know, powerful and you can make your child do whatever you want. You'll spank them if you have to, and they'll turn around. But it's not always that way. You know, 50% of who we are is in our genes, like being born a sociopath. It's not something that just happened.
No, no, that's right. And then, of course, later you got the diagnosis anyway,
Right.
which, you know, that was a medical brain condition that he did have. And the challenge was, though, when Aaron was growing up as a child, which a lot of children do, there's a lot of broken families that are happening today, and it really does traumatize the child. Now, even if you do separate on a good note, it still traumatizes the child. Now, there's a lot of broken families that are very destructive. The parents are at war. They involve the children. So they have all of this going on inside of them. And Aaron had this going on inside of him as a child. So, you know, when we think about, like, he got the medical diagnosis, so he had that all along, on top of, you know, your first wife walking out. She walked out and left you with Aaron, and he was only 4.5 years old. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, he had all of those emotions of feeling rejected. And then you remarried, and then something else awful was going on that you had no idea about.
Well, I married a lady that I had worked with. Her husband had died same time that I'd gone through the divorce, and she cooked wonderful meals for me and my son, and one point took him to the zoo. And I thought, okay, this is somebody that cares about him, and it's better for him to have a stepmother than to have no mother at all. That's the way I felt about it at the time. And so I thought I was, making a good decision. Of course, I find out the hard way that you can't always trust people. They're always on their best behavior, obviously, before you marry them. And then
Yes.
quite often things change
Yes.
for the worse. And, with the job I had, I got into outside sales. So 2 or 3 times a month, I might be out of town, and she had complete access to him where, you know, uh, she could do things, abuse him in some way, like making him stand by his bed all night and not go to sleep. With one exception, I never saw any physical signs of abuse, but there's many ways you can abuse
Oh, yeah,
somebody.
absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
with the mother leaving, and that, traumatized him. I mean, even as a teenager, he told one of his friends, how upset he was that his mother, did that. And that's something very hard for anybody to get over. And then to have an abusive step parent, and on top of that, you're born a sociopath, so your brain is not normal like a normal person. You don't have the same connections in your emotional area of your brain, and
Right.
you add all that up, and you can't help but wonder that
Yeah.
it wasn't worse than it was.
Yeah, that's right. And so he had all of these inner feelings of shame and rejection and anger. There's so many emotions that we carry. And Aaron wasn't walking with God at that time. Now, if you're not walking with God and having a relationship with him, it's very hard to manage all of these mixed emotions. And counselors and people can help you the best that they can. But coming from my experience, there is nothing like the love of God and knowing his unconditional love that
Right.
that all I can say is it saved me, because I was a rebellious child due to my father installing terrible things in my mind from a young child, a lot of fearful things, a lot of rebellious type living. He was having plenty of affairs and things like that as a child I had to witness, but I couldn't say anything. And he was telling me all these secrets like I was his best friend, and I'm only 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. And so I was always with him. He favored me, and he just drilled my mind with terrible things. And then it got to the point where after 20 years of marriage, my mum couldn't take it anymore. And she's a beautiful woman. She worked very hard. She did everything right. She's not a drinker. My dad was an alcoholic. She couldn't take it, so she left. But he didn't want to be living by himself, so he'd already poisoned my mind that he was like this idol to me, this king. He was everything to me. So he then poisoned my mind against my mother and said terrible lies, and so that I could go and live with him. So from all of the lies that he built into my brain and wrong identity, it just put a lot of fear in me, and it made me believe I was someone that I wasn't. And so I lived that life that I thought I should be, because he drilled it that way. So when I did end up moving in with him, it was just fueled with alcohol and parties and a whole debauchery lifestyle that no teenager under the age of 18 should be ever living. And and this was completely acceptable to him. And I'm writing it all out in my book to help people. But when you're conditioned that way, and I didn't know God. Well, I did believe in God, but I had no relationship with Christ. There was no relationship there, but I always believed in God, always prayed, always, tried to best to communicate. And, growing up with that kind of broken family with a destructive father who was raising hell with my parents and using guns and threatening, and it's complete and utter abuse that all of my sister and my brother had to witness. I had to witness. It puts in a lot of it really destroys your mind, and it steers the course of your life. And from that, I was incredibly rebellious and lived a terrible life. And it isn't the life for anyone. But once I connected back with God, and he really touched my heart, knowing the unconditional love, you know, he just has a way of turning everything around, and he shows you that there's no shame, that there's no guilt. You know, you're not condemned for anything, you know, and he shows you himself, he shows you his love, and he shows you that he doesn't see any of that. He sees you perfect in Christ, just as he is, and just as righteous. And he just sort of takes you under his arms, and he trains you up. He trains you up in the right way. But I found once I really encountered Christ and the love of God, it automatically within me told me the right way to live. You know, he showed me the right way to live just on himself being such pure love. And seeing love is the right way to live. And when you're drilled in fear, you'll do everything to go the opposite way. You will drink, you'll do drugs, you will swap partners. You know, a lot of people have a lot of inner phobias, and teenagers, it starts from there, and then it gets up into adults. And then when you become an adult, then you swap partners, or you're cheating, or, you know, you're sneaking around behind each other's back. Then you divorce one, then you go with the other, thinking that that one's better on the other side. You know, it's a mixed up, confusing lifestyle. And then you're bringing that into your kids, who are then getting raised in all of that type of lifestyle. And, you know, they're hurt, they hold it within them. And then, you know, it carries on. So there has to be a point where you recognize, look, I'm not doing something right here. Something isn't right. I mean, you can't keep flipping and changing. there's your call. No, that's all right. Yeah, so it's really coming into the love of God. That's my point, that no matter where you are today, you know, it doesn't matter what you've come from, what sort of rebellious life you've lived, how many partners you've changed, or what you've done, you can still make today the change. You can still stop right now and turn everything around, change the way you think, and get out of it all, you know? And well, so that's the way I see it. And with teenagers, you know, I had a change of heart, of course, and came to God and saw the right way to live. But even when I was rebellious, I was always still trying to raise my kids right and do the right thing there. My private life was hell. But when it came to parenting and raising my kids, I always looked out for them. And I always tried to install in them to do the things don't do what I'm doing. But now when I came to God, I was saying to them, okay, now I've really cleaned up my life. And they saw it anyway. They completely see me do this complete turn. And then I started drilling them with, you know, just the love of God, you know, but they couldn't help but notice it, because when you're in love, you can't help but show it, right? So I was just, which I still am, I'm still on fire for Christ, absolutely. So I was just in love with God, you know, I just met the love of my life. So everywhere I went, I was just turning heads, because everyone wanted to know what was wrong with me. You know, they were like drawn to me like flies to light. It was just the love of God. And so my kids saw that. And then from out of that, even today, I do the same thing. I teach them in not what to do. You know, this was my life before. I didn't know any better. I was raised in fear. And but that doesn't mean that you can't turn it around. And it also, you don't want to go that way. There's a better life for you. You know, God says that he knows the plans that he has for you, and they're all for good. He wants to give you the best life. And that's what I continually tell my kids. I go, you know, the love of God is for everyone, all rebellious people, everybody, absolutely. I said, we don't look at them and condemn them or anything like that. We look at them and we want to help them, because God wants them to have the best life. He doesn't want them to destroy themselves in alcohol abuse, drug abuse, guns, knives, murders, everything that's going to destroy their life, and maybe even cut their life short. They could have had a longer life, but you know, through the destruction of their flesh, they're just killing themselves early. God doesn't want that. So our heart is to always help them to turn and to see a better life, a better way, and to come into the arms of Christ, and, you know, to live now, to live eternally. And so this is what I continually try to get across to my kids, that it's okay to have a bit of fun. You want to have a couple of drinks, that's fine. Okay, but you don't have to abuse it. You don't have to go over. You don't have to be reckless. You know, you don't have to hurt anyone. You don't have to hurt yourself. You don't have to abuse people. Why do you want to do that? Why would you want to live that kind of life when there's such a better life for you out there? You know, and this was your constant message with Aaron as well, as he was a teenager. And as you know, it's very hard when dealing with rebellious teenagers or people to get a good message across. It is something that they have to experience the love of God. And then sometimes it is a fall. It's a matter of they have to fall to see him.
Well, it's very important for anybody trying to raise a teenager that you have good communication, just like you're talking about. You try to lead them in the right direction. You have rules laid out, and you have to really listen. Communication is not just you talking and saying you're going to do things my way or you're going to get in trouble. You have to listen. That's one of the biggest problems, I think, for kids nowadays is parents get caught up in all the work. They come home, they don't want to be bothered.
Yeah.
Tell them to go do their homework and leave them alone. And they don't know what's going on. And, there's such a problem nowadays with suicide among teenagers. They get abused online, social media, and the parents know nothing about it because they're not talking with them. They're not listening to them, finding out what their problems are. And it makes such a difference in their life if their parents are involved enough to have communications with them and actually listen to what they're saying and make them feel comfortable to where they know they can go to their parents and say, listen, I'm having a bad time at school or whatever it might be. And the parents can give them some good advice and just, if nothing else, just listen so they got an ear, to talk to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Such a difference.
Oh, huge difference. Absolutely huge. And that's, I never grew up with that type of situation at all. And so I always tried with my kids to keep the lines of communication open and talk to them. Like I said, my private life was hell before I knew Christ. But even though that was in my private life, when it came to my kids, I always tried to do the best that I could and not teach them to, hey, have a drink. I would say, no, don't give them a drink. I can drink because that's what I was thinking then, but I didn't really encourage them or do any of that sort of stuff. So I still had the brains and the sense, I guess, to try and raise them a bit different than how I was raised, because at that stage I was still very hurt with what I went through with my father, and I had a lot of shame. And when you're consumed in shame, you do tend to look for, well, I wasn't filled with Christ. I didn't have the love of God, you see. So I was looking for other things to fill and to satisfy me. And that's why I turned to drinking heavily and also swapping partners, because you think, well, and when you're in a mindset, you're going to attract the people that you're seeing yourself. It's like looking in a mirror. So you're hurt and down and you're rebellious. Well, you're going to meet hurt, down, rebellious people too. And you can already tell if you're going to do that, well, it's just going to lead into some sort of destruction. That's not a good mix. So, I was always trying to train them into a situation where I could see I had fallen and I needed and I lacked. And then once I came to Christ, well, then it was just a whole different ballgame altogether, because I'm teaching them in the love of God, and I'm teaching them that, all about his love, that it's completely different to human love. It's not like human love, and training them up that way, and also training them up daily. So I have just a constant continual talk. As I continually talk to God throughout my day, I continually talk to my kids and say, well, what do you think is the right way to manage here? How would you go about this? And it's just a general conversation. It's not a sit down and right, we need to have this out and da-da-da. I find the way that I counsel and talk to my kids is just through life experience, and teaching them the right way to go through a general conversation, just having a normal conversation, whether in the car or whatever, and trying to always steer them for them to see the benefits of everything that they're going to do when they do things right, and they're walking with God and they're doing things according to God. However, if you want to go this way, I'll give them a picture of what my life was like going the other way. And, I'm very thankful because, so far my kids have said, you know what, Mom, we don't want that life. We don't want the life you had. We'll take the other road. So I've installed it so much in their mind that they're so put off by it. And I say, well, you know what? If my junk and trash served a purpose to steer you correct, then I can tell you it was all worth it. I'd rather me have gone through this hell than to have any of my kids go through this hell. I use everything as a living now testimony, right? This is what's going on in my life right now. And I could tell you where I messed up. And this is what God said, and this is how you're going to fix it. So my kids will always remember me for that. I'm going in the grave with them saying, this is what Mum was like. Always instructing us, but in a good and positive way. So I really encourage all parents to really sit with their kids and just talk to them like they're your best friend. Be open with them about everything. Train them up into what is right, and just be open and honest with them with how you're feeling, with the things you've done, the errors. There's no shame in it. If anything, it's going to benefit their life and of course benefit your own, because when you share, it does release a lot within you. It has a lot of healing power.
Oh, yeah.
And we all make mistakes, big, small, whatever it is. You just learn from it and grow and take the next step and keep going forward in that growth. I know, that's how I see it. But, every day is a learning thing. And I'm no doubt going to mess up with something today and then go, God, okay, I messed up. All right, how can I fix this, Because it's only been 11 years of coming out of my whole life in error. So people forget, when they get wrapped up and they come to God and they want this whole new life, but they forget, hang on a minute, you've still got a lot of maybe subconscious, deep thoughts there that you're still unrooting out and nodding out that you're not aware of. So don't be hard on yourself. You were trained into a whole other lifestyle, and a lot of that isn't going to go in 5 minutes overnight. It's got to be worked out. It needs a lot of deep therapy. So God has a way of taking you on a journey to really uproot a lot of that mess and get the false lies out, and to really enforce and bring in his unconditional love and get that settled inside of you. And then once you get into that position, then so much in your life changes, It's just incredible. The whole journey with God is incredible. And of course, reading the book of Proverbs, how much wisdom's in there for training your children. That is just awesome. So much wisdom in there. I read a lot of those scriptures on fools. A fool does this and pride comes before a fall. And I just look at all that and go, yeah, that was me. That was me. That was me. That was me. So, but now I can look at the other side and go, hey, that's me. Now I'm the righteous one. I'm doing good, So there's a lot of good in there that I train my children up to go, now, here's a scripture on a fool. I'll give you a picture of me when I was a fool and did this. So, that's how I roll, and I make light of it now. I've come to Christ, I've changed everything around, and the only thing that I can do now is use what was meant to pull me down and to kill me, use it for good. If I can help my kids and I can help anyone, then absolutely. And that's what we all should be aiming for.
That's what the book was all about, is that, even though at the time, I really didn't want to talk about most of it. I didn't want to really go into it. But God made it plain to me that what I went through raising him would help any parent. Maybe they don't have a sociopath. Maybe they're not going to get into troubles that my son got into. Yeah. But they can still benefit from what I had to do under those extreme circumstances.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay, so we'll wrap up this teenage talk for the moment, and I really encourage people to go and purchase the book on Amazon, Collision Course with God, and you're really going to read some parts of Robert's testimony. We are writing a second book to Robert's testimony. It's a bit more in line for adults and really sharing the heart, shining God's light on evil. But I recommend going over there, purchase a copy of Robert's book, and he's going to really minister to you with a lot of wisdom and things that he learned as he walked with God and had to walk this out, this extremely hard, difficult situation. with his son. So I truly recommend you do that. And until next time, we'll see you all then. God bless everybody. Be safe, be well, and we'll do another talk soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.